That's all right. Good afternoon. I want to be able to go home this afternoon and see if I still have a wife. You know, we've only been married 54 years plus, but, you know, I've been away so often. So I'll get it started even though a couple of the members are a little detained. All right, and with that, first we should welcome our temporary member, and we'll go on with the business. Go ahead, General.
Mr. Chair, committee members, for the record, Major General David Michaelitis, Adjutant General, New Hampshire National Guard, Commissioner, Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. Here with me today is our Chief Financial Officer, Judy Chen. Okay, Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services, what do we do? Two major broad things, right? Military Affairs is the men and women in the New Hampshire Army and Air National Guard, numbering approximately 3,000 strong. And our Veteran Service portfolio, which has three different divisions of Division of Veteran Services, Division of Community-Based Outreach Programs, and our Veteran Cemetery. Distill that all down, you get a budget. In our annual operating budget, we were able to meet the governor's efficiency budget. The only difference between the governor's efficiency budget and the House recommendations was one line item. That line item had to do with cutting a little bit of general funds, approximately $55,000 over a 2-year budget to have us increase our fees for veteran dependents, like including spouses and children who get buried at the State Veteran Cemetery. And what the House proposed us to do was to increase that fee from $350 per burial to $450 per burial. That was the only change between the governor and House's budget. Subject to the questions, that's all I have.
Okay, questions from the senators? I want you to know, General, I was down in Washington last summer and met your boss down there. He spoke very highly of you, you know, and we were talking about the veterans bill that we had about defunding, you know, based on acts of Congress.
Yep, defend the guard.
So,
yep.
But he did speak highly of you, General. So.
No, thanks, sir.
Any other questions from the senators? All right. Thank you very much. Veterans Home.
I'll make a brief ethics statement at the beginning of the system, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Hello, Senator Birdsall. Hi. How are you this fine Friday? Good.
I'm goodness, I'm being serious.
It's nice to be here.
When you're ready.
All right. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Kim McKay, and I am the Commandant of the New Hampshire Veterans Home.
And I'm Jennifer Doig. I'm the CFO of the Veterans Home.
We do have a PowerPoint presentation there for you that we're going to go through, and we did outline the pages of the House budget, so that's there. New Hampshire Veterans Home was established in 1889, so we're very happy to report that we're strong. We are an intermediate care, long-term care facility, so we don't take skilled care. We take people who need long-term care and have a broad array of services that we offer. We're licensed for 250, but we are budgeted by the state for 225, and we hope to continue that. We're budgeted for 384 staff. Our recent challenge, which most healthcare arenas are experiencing, is recruitment and retaining both of our clinical and support staff. The New Hampshire Veterans Home utilizes the VA grant program enabled under 38 CRF 5141, which allows us to receive either partial or full pay for our veterans. To maintain that, we have to be certified yearly through the VA. The mission statement is to provide the best quality of care for the New Hampshire veterans with dignity, honor, and respect. And we take that mission very seriously. By RSA 119, we are managed by the Board of Managers, which is made up of 12 members who are appointed by the Governor and Council and confirmed by the Executive Council. We have commanders for the American Legion, the VFW, and the DAV, and 9 citizens. 2 of those 12 members that sit on our board are actually our residents, so they have a voice to the running of our facility. and they have oversight of the benefit fund that we have for operations, as well as they appoint the commandants. Page 5, our strategic priorities that you'll see throughout this budget is growing the veteran resident census to meet the needs of the veterans in the community, and we are seeing that improve. Reduce the number of vacant staff positions. We are seeing that go down. Meet the VA survey requirements that we need to stay licensed through the VA. Have our health, life, and safety initiatives met. Replace and upgrade some of our vehicles and equipment. Improve our infrastructure with the IT. Continue with building maintenance because our buildings are aging. And we also have a VA project that was approved through the state budget in 2016 to add an addition that will be moving some of our rooms. We're not changing our bed count. We are actually just going from 4 people sharing a bathroom down to single rooms for 20 people. So again, the current census right now, today, we are at 140 veterans. I came 3 years ago to the New Hampshire Veterans Home, and we were capped at 121. We have had more staff, and with more staff, we can have more veterans. Our goal is to hit that 225, and with our current wait list right now, we think that we can do that. So we're working with that goal in mind, 225. As you can see from slide 7, we did see a big downturn with COVID-19, and we have been steadily rising since then. We have had 48 admissions so far this year, since July 1st, and unfortunately we have lost 30 people to discharging, and that is because our average age is 83. So we have many people in their 90s, and one person who is 100, and we will be admitting a gentleman who's 101 in 2 weeks. So, but our yearly census.
Just a comment on that.
Yes.
I used to appreciate when you'd come and tell me the status of Norm Sanborn, but unfortunately,
Yes.
he has passed, and
He has.
one of my great friends.
If you came to my facility today and any Friday, you will see Norm still living there because he
Red
started
shirt.
Red Shirt Friday, and so we all wear red. I tried to be a little bit respectful and not wear so much red today, but Red Shirt Friday started by Norm, and that has spread, and it's wonderful. So yes, he is a dear friend.
Fondly remembered.
Yes. So our census is now 130, and again, we are continuing on the uptick with that. Slide 8, we have 3 revenue sources that come in to the facility, and they're solely dependent on the resident census. So the more that we increase our census, the more federal funds we have, and the lower the general funds we will use. So right now, our VA per diem, depending on their disability rating, a veteran who has less than a 70% disability rating, the daily per diem rate is $144.10. For those who are disabled 70 or higher, we have a rate of $587.20. Currently, we have 18. We are seeing that number increase with the PACT Act. More people have qualified for service-connected disability. And with that, when we have that higher amount, we have to provide more care to them that is covered under our services than the basic rate, as far as like paying for PT, OT, those kind of therapies. Our agency income is based on the resident themselves. If they have more than $30,000 worth of assets, they pay a higher rate. So we have 3, that's another revenue source, the room and board, and then the general funds make up the rest. For today, the meat of everything here on page 9 is our House budget that was put forth. We have had both governors support our budget, and the House has also supported our budget. So you'll see some lines are higher than they were and some that are lower than they were. We're really trying to make sure that things are being paid out of the right accounts. And so we have adjusted that, and I can answer any of those questions, or Jen can, if you have questions related to that specific lines. The capital budget request, we have the House and the governor. Well, I'll start with the governor supported 5 of our initiatives. replacing 3 rooftop air handlers for $1.3 million. Those are struggling along, and we absolutely need to get those replaced, or we are not going to have heating and air conditioning on one side of our building, which has 100 veterans in it living there. We have a diesel tank replacement of $60,000 that was approved. We have a replacement of 7 veterans tubs and a purchase of a bariatric stretcher shower trolley. Replacing 50 of the veterans resident beds. Some of them are the knee break, and they're very old, and we are having a lot of issues with workers' comp from those, so we need to replace those. And then medical lifts. The House did add one of our requests that we had originally put in, and that was around updating and making our TAR South and TAR North ADA and IPC, which is infection prevention control compliance. So I know that's not in your world, but I wanted just to share that with you. We do have a request for House Bill 2. We're asking to add back in language that had always been there, and it dropped out last budget cycle, and that was due to us. We had a transition from our past CFO into this CFO, and we were unaware that it had fallen off the radar. So we were really locked into not being able to transfer monies within our budgets. So we're asking for that to be put back in, so it gives us a little flexibility, especially in our maintenance dollars, because the DAS does not oversee our maintenance of our
LBA
buildings.
will write that amendment in my name, and so it will get discussed by the whole committee.
Excellent. All right, thank you. We appreciate that. And that's all I have, besides saying that we are very proud of our facility. It's a tradition. If you haven't been there, please come, please see what we do, and I am open for any questions that you may have.
Senator Rosenwald.
Few questions. Thanks for taking my question.
Thank you.
In your House Bill 2 suggested language, it's, Melissa is here, says only transfers above 100,000 would have to go to fiscal. Would that be cumulative or only any single transfer? So usually don't we do it as a cumulative?
If it's for a specific accounting unit, it would be cumulative. So it's not per the class line.
Okay, so, okay. And if I could follow up, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm reading this footnote that starts on page 1377 that says, if you have extra revenues, you can ask the governor and executive council for permission to spend them. And I'm wondering, have we done that before? Because usually doesn't the fiscal committee handle stuff like that rather than the governor and council?
Hi, Senator Rosenwald. It's nice to see you again. This is something unique for the Veterans Home. As far back as I have been able to look, we've always had that footnote. Really, it goes around how much veteran money we get, so federal money from the VA or room and board. We don't know, it's very hard to project who's going to be in our facility, what their disability is going to be, to even know, is it going to be a full pay, is it going to be a partial pay, what their assets might be. So it's very hard to project that. And so because of that, if we do not receive up to what we're projecting we will for the federal and the room and board particularly, or for the prescription drugs, then we can increase the general funds to be able to go up to the appropriation, only to the appropriation that we get in our entire budget.
But we don't usually exceed.
No, we don't exceed our
We don't
budget.
usually exceed.
No,
We don't
I
exceed our
understand
budget.
that. My
Yeah.
question was just really about the process of who approves that.
It's,
Because I
it's,
think this is the first time I've ever seen not the fiscal committee.
where this is
approving.
approved through the budget process, we don't have to have a special approval to do that. It's part of our closing. If we don't receive that revenue, It's up to me to make sure and manage that we don't go over the appropriation, the total appropriation and expenditures throughout the year.
Okay, I'll take it up offline. But I do have a different question. if I could.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. So, and this is a question I always ask every year. It looks like you had about 20% of your population die last year. What percentage of your staff gets the flu vaccine or got the flu vaccine last year?
We don't require them to report out how many do, but we ask them to report. And so I would have to get that number for you. But again, it won't capture everyone because some people choose not to share that with us, and we don't mandate them to have the flu vaccine or share it back with us. So I can get you
That'd
that
be
number.
helpful,
Yes.
because you've told us, or your predecessor has told us in the past, that influenza was really bad among our population, or norovirus or something.
Right. We did really well this winter, honestly. It was pretty good. Our numbers are down from what we normally would see at this time. So
20%?
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Additional questions? Senator?
Just a comment. I visited this past fall and I was impressed with what you do, so thank you for that. Are they still complaining about the food?
Yes,
Okay.
but we're working on it. We
Good.
tried.
I'm glad to hear it.
I think the view is that they feel that we have the same food that prisoners do.
Yeah,
Because we
that
have
was
the
what I
same-
heard.
We have the same contract, and so they are saying you're feeding us like prisoners. And so we're trying really hard to dispel that. And honestly, we are starting a project where we're going to start stopping in and eating with them to do quality taste tests and rate the food and try to show them that. But they have learned that it's the same contract for all 24/7 facilities, and they're a little stuck on that part.
All right, thank you.
Would you believe that back when I was in the Army, that they complained about the food at the first part of the month, but the last part of the month, when they'd spent their paycheck,
They
they
ate
were
it.
real happy with it? Any further questions from the senators? Senator?
Thanks for taking my question. Speaking of food, has there been any thought of maybe having some of the community colleges come in and just periodically doing a, like what they do here, some of their those that are studying for chefs to come in and cook for them?
That would be a great idea. We talk a lot about the community colleges and nursing staff coming in, but I haven't talked about that, so that's a great idea for them to we would host them and they could do a meal.
Right, and it also gives the students experience.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
You can see the chancellor right behind you in the back row.
All right. Yes, we're there. Let's do it. All right, excellent.
All right, additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
And next up is UNH, or USNH. We have a couple of disclosures here. I am the Senate representative to the Board of Trustees of the university system, and I don't believe it creates a conflict. And Senator?
I am an employee of the university as a faculty member. However, the state's support for the university has no direct impact on my position or my income, so I will participate and vote throughout. Thank you.
All right. When you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Provencher. I serve as the Chancellor of our state's university system.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mike Pilot. I'm the Chair of the Board of Trustees for the university system. As I understand, it's somewhat unique to have the chair participate in this meeting, and I thought I'd maybe just take a second to put that in context for you. I am here to communicate a message to this group, this committee, of respect for this process and respect for you who are leading it on behalf of my entire board. We I think have a pretty solid understanding of the difficult trade-offs you're being asked to make during this, this difficult cycle. We admire your willingness to serve, but we don't envy you. I also wanted to communicate that our Board of Trustees finds itself similarly situated. It won't be any news to any of you that higher education is going through a tectonic shift as the market forces completely go upside down. We are not immune to that. But I want you to know that you have a Board of Trustees who is deeply engaged in this work and remains committed to the mission of the university system, which is to provide affordable, accessible, high-quality education to the citizens of New Hampshire. But we also have a very keen understanding that that system must rest on a solid financial foundation. That is the trick that we're faced with right now. That is the work that we're undertaking right now. Senator Gray can attest to that. He sits through all of the meetings. It's a primary focus for us each and every time we get together, is navigating through this transition where we find ourselves with a structural deficit. We've got a system that's built for a market that is no longer available to us. We are working through that. We have a plan that we're operationalizing, and with all of that difficulty, the thing that keeps us motivated and wanting to participate as members of this board is the return that this system provides to the state of New Hampshire. It wouldn't be possible, we're going to talk about that in our materials here today. It would not be possible without the partnership that this system has and has had with the state of New Hampshire. And our message here is that we're at a critical inflection point with regard to keeping ourselves positioned for the future, and we want to keep that partnership going. Thank you. It's good to be here with you. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we have provided some materials. I'm going to walk through some of that. Mike and I are going to do a little bit of tag teaming. We've also provided letters of support for the university system from the Business and Industry Association, New Hampshire Life Sciences Association, some business testimonials. We do business with, we have partnerships with thousands of businesses across the state. There are also letters from the Durham Town Council and the mayor of the city of Keene relative to the university system. So with that, let's start with page 2. As requested, we provide the difference between our current funding levels and those that are in the House budget. So when you exclude the one-time funding that the state provided for the university system this biennium, I'm going to put that aside, the House adopted budget reduces the state investment by 30% between the current biennium and the next biennium. That's $57.6 million reduction over the biennium. Maybe I should have mentioned, looks like the university system budget is on page 1548 of your big binder. I will say that this steep reduction is unsustainable for the university system. The governor had recommended a 4% reduction, which certainly would be felt, but we can absolutely manage that type of reduction. And as Mike Skelton from the BIA often notes, New Hampshire now has the distinction of having the oldest workforce in the country. 27% of our workforce is over the age of 55, and it's critical that we have workforce, new, young pipeline, talent, right, a pipeline to grow and attract business in the state. So on slide 3, Mike talked about the investment that the state makes in the university system, and I want to talk briefly about where that investment goes. So $95 million was the support that the state provided for the university system this year. 81 million of that 95 directly goes to offset New Hampshire student tuition. It's a subsidy on for our New Hampshire students. It's about this year. It's about $7,300 per student that the state subsidizes for in-state tuition. The remaining $14 million partially funds statutory programs. So there are programs such as Cooperative Extension, the Agricultural Experiment Station. So the state other than the tuition offset, that partially funds those statutory programs. There are a couple other programs that are funded by the university system. Those are tuition waivers for National Guard and foster children. That runs about $2.5 to $3 million a year, and that's funded by the university system.
Before you go on,
Sure.
if I can, so that if the House budget, those other programs that you talked about, other than the tuition, are statutory and mandatory that the university, pay those expenses. Is that correct? And that the hit to that line item would be in more than likely the difference in tuition.
It would, Senator, and thank you for the question. Let's remember that the statute doesn't require the level of service that's provided. So, and I'm not going to speculate on where we would have to go if the university system was going to sustain a $25 million a year cut. But I suppose some of these programs, the services would reduce, right? We wouldn't be able to provide the same level of service. I will also say on the tuition offset, I know it's been talked about, I've read it in the paper, that, well, the university system sustained this type of cut in 2011, and so it should be able to sustain it now. I went back and looked. I wasn't with the university system then, but after that state cut in 2000, it was actually fiscal year 2012 and 2013, university system increased tuition 19.5% in the first year and 13.5% in the second year. There is no one would come to the university, no student would join us at the university system if we even considered increasing tuition at that level. So we would not be able to generate that through tuition revenue. It would have to come, for the most part, I believe, through cuts and massive restructuring. And we're going to talk in a little while, and Mike mentioned it in his opening remarks. We already have a structural deficit without a deep cut that we are making, and more changes are coming. I hope that was I probably overly answered your question, Senator.
It's all good information.
On slide 4, I just wanted to break out for you that tuition offset funded by the state. Again, it's $81 million of the 95. I mentioned the $7,300 of subsidy. The average net tuition cost for a New Hampshire student after that state subsidy is about $7,000 per student, net tuition. The average net tuition cost for an out-of-state resident is about $16,600. Again, that's net after financial aid and discounting. So there's a because of the state investment, a New Hampshire student pays about 42% of what an out-of-state student pays. So again, on slide 5, really want to keep with the theme, and we have a little bit more material on this, about the return that the citizens of New Hampshire receive from the investment that the state makes in the university system. Each year, about $3.7 billion in annual economic impact is derived from the operations and alumni and all the work across the university system. I will note there are 3 bullets on the right side of that slide, and I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning realizing that I have a mistake there. The first bullet should read 26,000 students. There were 23,000 students in the fall of '24, but when we annualize that number should be 26,000. And then the next bullet correctly says 13,000 non-resident students, because we are about 50-50 split, New Hampshire and non-resident. So again, though, when you think about $3.7 billion from the operations, from the suppliers that we work with, the jobs that creates, 90,000 plus alumni in the state. There are 13,000 direct and indirect jobs that flow from the operations of the university system. And we're not going to talk a lot about this in the presentation, but I do just want to point out the research enterprise at the University of New Hampshire. Oh, yes.
Just before you do that, because I want to go back to the 26,000 and the 13,000.
Yes.
Okay? prior statements from the university system is that they accept every New Hampshire student who meets the basic qualifications of the university system. And the difference between the 26,000 and the 13,000 reflects us accepting out-of-state students at that higher tuition rate.
Correct, correct. And remember, we have capacity. If more students want to apply in-state and out-of-state, we welcome them, right? We have more capacity for those students.
Sorry for the interruption.
No,
but I
no,
didn't
not
wanna
at
get
all.
too
Thank you
far
for the
away from
question. I just want to point out the research enterprise at UNH has grown 50% since 2019. UNH is now categorized as an R1 research institution. There are only 180 or 185 institutions in the country categorized as an R1. That $250 million of research, the research dollars assist businesses. Businesses interact with the university on research all the time. Even our undergrad students, research is not confined to graduate and doctoral students. Undergraduate students intersect with research all over the campus. So that's a significant contribution, if you will, or a return for the state from that research enterprise.
I could jump in. Real quick comment. I look at these numbers and they're great, but there's 90,000 alumni living in New Hampshire. I'm sure some of them own businesses, employ people, et cetera. And I don't know if the system, or maybe an economics department somewhere in the system, could try to estimate that. I think it would really magnify the impact that the institution has on the state on an ongoing basis, not just one time.
Right.
Which I think is kind of what we're looking at here.
Well, this study was done in 2023. And actually, Senator, and thank you for the question, of that $3.7 billion of annual economic impact, 1.8 billion, and then there's a science and a methodology to all that, derives for the most part from those alumni.
Okay.
Those alumni work and live and pay taxes and have
Right.
businesses, and then those businesses.
So this analysis captured it, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Then I'm good.
Senator Ennis, this is something I think a lot about. It's, when I think about the return that the university system provides to the state, I think about workforce. That is the primary thing. It's the center of identity. And I look out at our state, and I think our workforce development system, integrated system between the legislature and the business community and higher education, community colleges K through 12, could really be contemporized, right? And the data point that you're talking about, I think, is just one example of a better understanding of the output, but understanding what the inputs are and which inputs can help affect that output is something that I'm hopeful for, that we see some progress in over these next 5 years in our state.
Yep. If I could ask one final follow-up.
Go ahead.
Of the 13,000 out-of-state students each year, do you know how many stick around when they graduate? It's got to be a decent number.
It's actually, we have a slide on this a little later.
Okay. Well, I can wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
But those kind of questions are the kinds of questions where those answers should be top of mind for all of us, right? We should know that, right? So on workforce, I put this chart in the deck. This is about page 6 now. This is an actual page from our board materials that we use every time we get together to kick off our educational excellence meeting, which is one of our 3 major committees. What this data is here, it's published by the New Hampshire Employment Security Economic and Labor Market Information Bureau. These are the top 12 occupations ranked by the number of jobs that are likely to be created and the value of those jobs to people who attain them for graduate and undergraduate degree people. You'll see that the list under the bachelor's degree, these jobs, if you go through all of the individual jobs that are listed and the numbers of openings that are forecasted to come available, 10 of these are in the field of business, right? You have health and education also represented. On the graduate side, 9 of those 12 are in the health sector. you have education and the legal profession also represented there. This is a roadmap that's provided by the state resources. This is where the intersection of our greatest need and our students' greatest opportunity lives. So we try to use this as a reminder. Are we focusing our program efforts in the right place to deliver on the needs of both the state and the students at the same time? The next page is a picture of how we're doing on that delivery. And this is data from last year. You'll see that we have in our undergraduate degrees that were awarded, we had 4,347 degrees awarded, and you can see the percentage of each sector. And if you do the math, you'll see that business, health, and education represent a little over a third. These are employees who entered into or graduated degrees in these fields, right? Our undergraduate education was represented by a little more than a third in the business, health, and education sector. And on the graduate sector, where remember health, education, and the legal profession were the areas of greatest need, 50% of our degreed individuals received degrees in those fields. So the alignment is there for last year. I wanted you to see that this is something that the board and the institutions look at every meeting and make sure we're not getting off track with regard to where the state's needs are and where our students' opportunities are greatest. And then the next page, 8, is sort of the one way of answering a question that was alluded to a little bit earlier. These are the graduates of our program from that prior page that are entering the New Hampshire workforce within the first year after receiving their degree. 2,000 undergrads, 750 graduates, 150 doctoral degreed people, 3,000 USNH graduates entering the New Hampshire workforce last year. So that we know, 3,000 UNH grads. The interesting data point for me about that, so that's a material contribution, I would say, to the workforce needs of the state, particularly with regard to those sectors that we talked about on the prior page. But 80% of the graduates working in New Hampshire were residents of New Hampshire. So there's the nexus, right? So for me, this number 3,000 on this page, that is the ultimate measurement. Everything we do, everything we think about, everything we invest in together individually, as we talk about this collaboration between education, the legislature, and the business community, this is the number we should be trying to drive up.
So Senator Ennis, that would answer your question about non-residents. So about 20% we know stay and work here. And so to double down on what Mike just mentioned, we need to keep New Hampshire students in New Hampshire because they are much more likely to stay and work here in New Hampshire and drive the workforce that our businesses and all of our employers need. So, and as you folks well know, over the past half dozen years, last 3 biennium, the state has really upped its investment in the university system, and it has made a difference for the university system and for our students. And on the next page, I will argue mightily that that investment is working. The next page, slide 9, shows that since 2019, 2020, the average net cost to our New Hampshire students for tuition and fees has actually dropped 7%. And remember, that's at a time when inflation grew 23%. And that, again, is directly related to that state investment because we have kept tuition flat while the state investment has increased. And so on the slide, the graph on the right, for the first time since 2013, the number of New Hampshire students attending our institutions increased this fall by almost 3%. It was 273 students since 2013. So again, I argue the investment the state has made is working and paying dividends.
Senator?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. How much of this could be related, or if it is at all related, to the unique scholarships that we have put together?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So The unique scholarships, I don't know how much of it, but I'm certain it has an impact. I sit on the College Tuition Savings Advisory Commission, right, that oversees the unique funds. And in the last 2 to 3 years, what used to happen to those dollars, that when they came into the state, they went out to all the institutions of higher education, 70% of the dollars went to grow an endowment at each school, and the endowment would shoot off earnings to fund scholarships, and 30% of those dollars would fund direct annual scholarships. The commission flipped that about 2 or 3 years ago. So now 70% of the dollars that are coming in are going straight into the hands of the most neediest New Hampshire residents. So that absolutely could be contributing to increasing New Hampshire enrollment when more scholarships dollars are available to them. Thank you.
So Kathy, I'll just underscore your point that this is actually working, and it has not been easy. It has not been easy for this committee. It hasn't been easy for the legislature to appropriate the funding that you have over these last few years. It hasn't been easy for the university system to resist raising tuition in an inflationary environment over 20%. And if I could put you in the room when we talk about the price increase raising tuition, it has been a rich debate, a rich conversation each of the last 5 years, and we have landed on a refusal to raise New Hampshire tuition because we're committed to this long-term strategy of making education more affordable to our New Hampshire residents. And that has worked through the collaboration of all of us here. It is working now, and we really want to be able to contribute, to continue that as best we can. That doesn't mean no tuition increases, but it means tuition increases in a way that keep a New Hampshire education the most affordable opportunity for a New Hampshire resident. The next page, this is an attempt to help put you in the context of what's going on in higher education. What you see is a demographics page of enrollment data for New England higher ed, public higher ed institutions from 23 through 25 and projected out through 2033, the next 10 years. It's a bleak picture if you forward out to 2028. And if you think about how this data is assembled, it's not too hard to forecast the number of graduating seniors 4 years from now, right? You count up the 8th graders in our served market. When you get beyond that, it gets a little dicey, and there's a little more room for assumptions and error. But we've got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen over these next 5 years with regard to enrollment just based on the demographic trends. Those trends aren't new. They're not starting in 2023. In fact, we got our first look as a board at this looming demographic cliff, is the term, in 2019. I can remember it was my first meeting as a trustee. We were presented with data from a nationally recognized industry consultant that this demographic cliff was was looming, and we were getting ready to have a real impact on our enrollment, and that schools in the Northeast were going to be particularly affected because of the density of higher ed institutions here in our particular region and the enhanced rate of demographic decline of graduating seniors. That did in fact occur as it was forecasted. The USNH enrollment in 2019 was 30,400 students. The USNH enrollment in fiscal year 2025, this current academic year, was 26,440. That's a 13% drop over those prior 5 years. The projection that we use as a system to forecast our enrollment out at the end of this, in 2030, which is as far forward as we're looking currently, and I'll take you through the detail of how we forecast that in a couple of pages, is 23,700, which is an additional 12% decline in enrollment from where we are today in 2025. So that's the slope that we're on. And for a tuition-dependent institution, that represents some real structural challenges, right? We are losing nearly a quarter of our enrollment over a short period of time, and getting the costs aligned with that new level of revenue opportunity is a painful but needs to be strategically done. It's doable, but it needs to be done strategically so you don't damage the experience of our students, the quality of the mission, and you don't damage the brand in the marketplace because we're in a highly competitive. You can imagine every institution in our competitive market is faced with the identical dynamics. So you can imagine what the competition looks like for the student at an individual level. And I can tell you, I'm sure you know from your own experience and talking to your constituents and your friends, that the college decision, especially for those who we serve, is fundamentally an economic one. And at the end of the day, the part of the decision equation that carries the most weight is how much is this going to cost my family? So we try to stay laser focused on that, and we try to take tough action to make sure that we keep our cost structure in line with what the market opportunity is going to let us recover in the marketplace. I'll talk a little bit more about how we manage the institutions financially in a couple of minutes.
So sometimes I feel like I walk around with a dark cloud over my head, but the point, so university system, structural deficit, we know it, we're on it, we're working on it. But when we think about what these numbers mean to our future workforce, economy, quality of life, that's another piece of the puzzle. So on the next slide, I just want to run through, so as Mike mentioned, since 2019, we've been looking at this. We knew this was coming. This is not a surprise. We have contained costs. I'll show you in a minute that since 2019, I think our total operating budget has gone up 4% or 4.5%. Again, during a time when inflation was rising 23%. How have we done that? Fewer faculty and staff. We've reduced full-time employees by 5.4%, part-time by 19%. We've reduced contributions to the 403B, the retirement system we have. We've reduced medical plan benefits and increased premiums twice since 2019. We are selling and demolishing buildings. We are exiting leased space. We know and are containing our costs because it's imperative that we have a healthy, vital public higher education system for our state, for our workforce, well into the future. So that's just through now. But as Mike mentioned, we have headwinds ahead of us before a deep state cut. Not deep state, a deep cut. Sorry.
Kathy, if I could just add to your thoughts there, another action that we took that's not on this page, but it was a material one, is that we invested $50 million in an early retirement program to help shrink the size of the staff in a way that worked for our workforce. And that has a terrific return on investment as an institution. But we did take that step to get out after this. It was in 2022. If we hadn't done that, we'd be in a materially worse position than we are today.
It's been very disruptive. You might hear from some of your constituents. It's been very disruptive. We've centralized everything we can get our hands on, procurement, HR, pay, but it has been disruptive. Change is hard. It's extra hard in higher education. Anyway, let's move on. So page 12. This is a...
Senator Rosenwald has a question.
On page 11, your employees are not in the state health plan,
No.
are they?
No,
Have you thought about that?
university system employees are not state employees pursuant to statute. The university system is a separate body, corporate, and I don't know, can't get all the lingo right, but we're a separate legal entity. So the university system employees are employees of the university. We are not members of the retirement system. We're not members of the state employees health plan. We can be, statute allows us to. We have met quite a few years ago now. We have met with folks in Commissioner Arlinghouse's office. At that time, our experience was a little better than the experience of state employees in general, so we we have our own plan. So that's, and we do, however, have, I think there are 13 different unions. Again, they're not part of the state bargaining. So some of these changes obviously need to be negotiated. They're not, unilateral decisions that the board and the presidents can make.
Thank you.
So personal, that the last time that was discussed with me, because of the differences in the unfunded liability and paying off that unfunded liability, it was not advantageous to the university system at that time to take that step and become part of our retirement system. That's just what I remember. I could be, in error in my memory, but that's what I remember.
So, it's dangerous when I try to remember like decades ago, but I believe that the university system hasn't been part of the retirement system, if ever, it's been decades. And the university system, I think in the 80s, had its own defined benefit plan. Defined benefit plan, and ended that plan and moved everyone to a defined contribution plan. So the university system doesn't have an unfunded pension liability. Well, it might be like $4 million now, and it's funded from folks that back in the 80s. So we don't have, I think we might have a retiree medical liability, but it's small, so. Okay, slide 12, just want to make the point, like I do as an accountant in a chart, that revenues are not keeping pace with our expenses. And the other reason I often go back to 19, you might say, well, why does she have 19 and 25? Because COVID distorts any type of a trend analysis. So you can see on the first highlighted line, our net tuition and fees has dropped $46 million since 2019. Our operating revenue is up $5 million. Part of that is because the state has invested $14 million more between 19 and 25. Our expenses have increased 4.7% since 2019. Again, at a time when inflation was 23%, the only way we kept it's cost containment. I can't say it's cost reduction because the costs aren't lower, but we've contained costs through those, what I showed you on the slide prior to this one. One more thing I would like to point out on this slide, I guess a couple things. It is highly likely that the university system's bond rating will be reduced if we sustain this kind of cut from in the state investment. Standard & Poor's said as much, and our last review is in October of 24, and indicators for what would cause a downgrade, a decrease in state support would be one of those items. The only other thing I want to point out in this slide, and it's another thing I've read in the paper. In the fiscal 25 column, if you go down to total operating expenses, that's $777 million. So that's our operating budget without grants. I try to pull grants out of trend analysis because, as I mentioned, grants have increased 50% during this period, and $1 in is $1 out in grants. So $770 million, operating expenses in fiscal 25. Of that, $221 million is for room and board, which would have nothing to do with state support. We do not use state money for room and board or dorms or anything. That would get our operating expenses that relate even tangentially to state dollars at $556 million, not the $2 billion that I've seen in the paper. So a $25 million cut on $556 million is a little different than a $25 million cut on $2 billion. So I just wanted to make that point on this slide. Okay.
The next page, page 13 now I'm on, this is an attempt to show you what the future looks like through the eyes of the Board of Trustees for the university system. This data here represents the results of the model that we use to project what the financial picture is going to look like. So you see our revenues and our expenses and the difference between those, which is the margin, projected out through fiscal year 2030. We manage the institutions, holding them to a 1% operating margin level of performance. The reason we do that is that we want to ensure that the costs are in control so that we are generating enough revenue, operating revenue, to cover our operating expenses consistently. Now, that 1% margin is the delta that is left over to fund reserves or to fund innovation or to fund other programs. A 1% margin is not representative of a healthy enterprise, but it is representative of financial discipline during a disrupted time like we're living in. So that's how we run the place today. What the data on this chart represents, how it's populated, our modeling assumptions are from here out through 2030. We project that enrollment will decline at a rate of 1.5% per year. That's a function of demographic issues we talked about. Also, just a changing attitude in society about the value of a public higher education degree. Online or competitive learning models is playing a role in that too. We get that all together, and our best guess is that our enrollment at the university system is going to go down by 1.5 points per year. That foots to the 12% reduction over the 5-year period that I had on my prior page. We also project that the discount rate, now that is the financial aid that the institutions need to offer in the form of a price discount to enroll the size of the class that they need to cover their operating expenses. That discount rate, it's where a lot of the science in enrollment exists, has been under tremendous pressure across the whole sector, particularly in our region, because of the increased competitive dynamic, right? Same number of institutions changing, a declining number of candidates to be students. And the discounting, as I said earlier, the economic variable is a highly, highly important one in the choice of where to go to school. So we project that the discount rate is going to go up 0.5% per year. So we're going to lose 0.5% of price per year over this next 5-year period. We've also modeled in that tuition and room and board will both increase by 2% per year. So we're reversing our last 5 years of no tuition increases out of necessity, right? That we've got to get the revenue line charged up a little bit, and we also are factoring that expenses, even with regard to considering the actions we plan to take, not changing anything structural, will increase at 2%. And when you add all of that together, this shows that the gap between revenues and operating expenses against that 1% operating margin requirement, that goal, are we covering our expenses, is projected to be $13 million this year, going up to $58 million by 2030. That's the delta between our operating revenues and our operating expenses, and those numbers assume state contributions at the governor's recommended budget level of a 7.3 or 7.4 cut across the biennium. So that assumes that we do nothing, right? But that is the picture. That's what the view is through our windshield as we look at what the market forces and competitive forces are doing to the university system of New Hampshire. Obviously, we're not going to let that occur, right? We have an effort underway led by the President's Council, which are the leaders of our 3 institutions and our Chancellor Kathy, to come up with a plan for structural change over the next 5 years that will eliminate that deficit and put us back into a financially sustainable position. Delicate work, but it's going to start getting into things like taking a harder look at our footprint across the entire system. You remember the page where I showed you all the different degrees, the bachelor degrees, and how they line up with our job needs in the state. You can see a lot of duplication of where we teach different things across the system. Rationalizing that program delivery is going to be essential to reducing the size of our institutions and the costs that come with it. Coordinating the delivery of those programs. So you can have an individual pursuing a degree at Plymouth State that can take a course that's offered at the University of New Hampshire and not have to offer it in both places, using online technology for asynchronous learning, to complement the flexibility of an academic program is going to be critical. And then, of course, pursuing administrative efficiencies. And those have certainly organizational implications. They have process implications. Honestly, we were not in a position to do a very good job of that over this last 5-year period because we had disparate financial systems, different HR systems, different student systems that didn't talk to each other well. And we were flying blind with respect to using data to inform how do we make this system more efficient. We had approved, it was 2 years ago now, Kathy, a $40 million investment in an ERP system, which will make all of that doable. We went live with the first module of that, which was HR and Financials in December of last year. We're underway, it's going well, but we're going to have the systems architecture to get at some of these administrative efficiencies that have been difficult for the system to pursue. But you can see that without a further deep cut by state appropriation, our work is cut out for us, right? And tightening the belts in a business as usual way isn't going to be enough to get it done. We have some very major challenges to undertake and execute well so that we don't break this engine that is delivering the workforce that we talked about a few pages ago.
Thanks, Mike. So obviously we have very difficult work ahead. I have every confidence, as difficult as it's going to be, we can get there. I still maintain it requires a partnership with the state. And this kind of cut, when we need to get through this next 5 years of these demographic headwinds, will kind of pull the rug out from under us. And I fear the unsustainability of it. So again, we've got hard work ahead. And well, we'll talk about this in a minute. And we'd like to continue the dialogue with elected officials. Listen, higher ed is changing, must change. We are adapting. It's not just the university system, it's the entire industry, not just in New England, but across the country. Slide 14, I don't have to really spend any time on this. I really just wanted to make the point that notwithstanding all of these challenges that we're facing financially and these moves that we're making, we understand our public mission and are investing alongside the state in projects that will positively impact the future workforce, future industries. The examples are the Spalding Life Sciences building at UNH. Actually, I think the opening's in June. We'll have to get invitations if you're interested in coming to visit that.
I've gotten mine.
Okay, terrific. Well, of course you have, Senator. You're on the board. The state invested $35 million in that space, and the university system an additional $60 million. And similar to the Hyde Hall project up at Keene, whole new entrepreneurial workforce development area for the North Country up at Plymouth. I should have said Plymouth, not Keene. And I'm going to wrap up. The last slide. We respectfully request funding be restored to the governor's recommended level. Frankly, I believe the New Hampshire Advantage depends on that. And I know the fact that Mike is here, my board, our presidents would really welcome ongoing improved dialogue with elected officials in thinking about a workforce strategy for the state. How does education dovetail into that? I'll circle back where we started. The oldest workforce in the state, and the number, probably from K-12, the number of young people on the decline, and that clogs up that pipeline. Partnership is key. So Happy to thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And
You want to introduce your third member of your group here,
Oh.
since she's
so
listed.
Lauren Banker is, why don't you stand up, Lauren? Lauren works with us, and she's Director of Government Relations. Her contact is on the back as well. You've probably seen her around the campus down here. And as always, any questions, any follow-up, you're hearing anything that maybe doesn't make sense, or even if you have good news you want to share with me, please reach out, text, call, email. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? They all look happy.
Just
Thank
make
you.
a comment,
Oh.
if I could. You know,
Certainly, Senator.
I've listened to presentations 3 times now from the system, and this one was very informative. So, well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chair, would you indulge one parting comment from me?
All right.
So I'm a product of this system myself. I grew up in Keene, went to Keene High School, spent a lot of my youth with cultural and athletic experience at Keene State College, went to the University of New Hampshire, left the state after graduation for 30 years, and came back the minute I could. I had been involved in the University of New Hampshire in different boards, and I joined the Board of Trustees as a skeptic in 2019. I really did. My career was business, and I had a point of view about higher education when I joined this board. And that was that. It was, you know, kind of a lazy, sleepy, fat entity, institution, industry sector. And for the first couple of years, I was sort of still parked there until I got more educated about what was going on. And today I am decidedly not. I'm not talking about the entire sector. I'm talking about our system. And I wanted to leave you with a thought that I think about all the time. The leaders that we have, Kathy, Don Burks at Plymouth, Melinda Treadwell at Keene, Elizabeth Chilton at the University of New Hampshire, our chief financial officers, our provost, the 3 critical leaders are wonderful executives, wonderful leaders. And I say this with all of the skepticism of a business guy coming in to work with a bunch of academics in higher ed. These people are committed to the mission for sure, which is not anything new, but they are super committed to solving this financial challenge that we have. They all look at that number of 3,000 New Hampshire graduates or USNH graduates entering the New Hampshire workforce and recognize that as their primary role is to drive that number north. You would be, if you don't have relationships with them, I guarantee you will like them all, you will respect them all, you will admire the work that they are doing every day to try to deliver on the mission, but get us right-sized. And then one parting word about the faculty. I think this is one of our real differentiators that we have available to us as we compete in this market. Our faculty at every institution are student success centric. That is unique in my experience with regard to this sector, but they are that. And they are that in a passionate, overt way that our students feel, and our students share the word about what a wonderful experience it is to go to any of our institutions. That's what we're trying to hang on to as we try to stick handle through these difficult economic times. So anything that you can do, any influence that you can have to help us stay on this good path that we're on this trajectory we're on, we would be deeply grateful, and our state will thank us for it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the chance to be here.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. As I recall, New Hampshire spends the least of any state on its public university system. And maybe I saw it in your slides, but I don't remember. You did refer to a 19% tuition increase in 2011 or 12.
13, I believe.
13. What would your projection be on the tuition increase you'd have to sustain with this $57 million cut?
Excellent.
Senator, thank you for the question. it's not sustainable. We can't. We, we, you know what, I don't know, but I will get you a percentage. But I can assure you, we could not increase tuition. We even went back, so right now, the board has approved a tuition increase for the next academic year up to 2.5%. So we started toying with, okay, well, what if we went back to the board and asked for more of a tuition increase than that? And price sensitivity and elasticity show our enrollment is going to fall off if we increase tuition. And then we're eroding our mission of pipeline and all of that. So I can get you a percentage, but I can tell you it would be unsustainable and we wouldn't be able to charge that.
It's such an excellent question, though, Senator Rosenwald. What it would do if we tried to pass this through, even if we tried to pass it through over the next 3-year cycle, it would price us out of the market for available students. We would become so expensive relative to the opportunities that we would not be able to enroll our class, putting further pressure on the revenue and making the operating deficit even bigger. Yep, it's an excellent question.
As an adjunct, again, would you believe, as far as I know, that you would not be able to raise tuition on the incoming class during that same period of time that you're having the decrease in state funding, and therefore not be able to raise that tuition until a year later, and that would cause additional problems.
Right, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Additional questions? Seeing none?
Thank you
Community
very
college
much.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Is ready to come up and tell Senator Birdsall how I guess that she can have the invitation to go up to the Veterans Home too and have dinner. Thank you. When you are ready.
Microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Innes, for the technical assistance. Thank you, Senator Gray, and thank you, Senators Mark Rubenstein, Chancellor for the Community College System.
And Shannon Reed, Director of Government Affairs and Communications.
So if we could please begin on the second slide, one after the title page. I'll try and paraphrase. Community College System of New Hampshire in the last year served about 24,000 students. About 12,000 of those students in our undergraduate programs, credit-based programs leading to degrees and certificates. About 10,000 in our early college programs, high school students, whether in their high schools, online, or on our campuses. And then about 2,500 students in our workforce programs, typically non-credit programs, although not exclusively, workforce-focused, shorter-term programs, but also apprenticeships, trying to assist students at all stages of life, from early to later, and with programs that align with what their needs are to find a place in New Hampshire's workforce. Campuses throughout the state allowing us to not only meet those students where they are, but also to tailor programs to the specific needs of each region in New Hampshire. So if you'll turn to slide 3, you'll see that what I've just described really is our mission. Building bridges that help students with interest and potential and motivation find opportunities that align with the needs of New Hampshire. And the final clause that you see in that mission statement, a strong New Hampshire economy, is part of our responsibility, part of our mission. And our efforts to align our work with the needs of the state are driven by data, supported by the information we receive from the state. So as you turn to page 4, you'll see that the cover page from a publication that the Bureau of Economic Affairs produced in the middle of the pandemic, talking about the state's strategy for recovery and expansion. And the first goal is retain and recruit a modern workforce. And everything that that report describes is the work that we do. And in fact, in subsequent reports that BEA has produced related to life sciences, related to advanced manufacturing, you'll see reference to the work of the community college system as a partner in all of those efforts, reaching parts of the workforce, that working adult, that student who needs something local that allows them to have access to high quality education and training that prepares them for the next opportunity in their life, but also for critical needs that the state has. If you'll turn to slide 5, another illustration. This is actually produced by New Hampshire Economic and Labor Market Information Bureau Director Brian Gottlob. He prepared it last year as part of a presentation to our Board of Trustees. On a regular basis, we're in touch with NHELMI to help inform our work. This was intended to bring our board into the conversation so that as they think about how they guide the work that we do on behalf of the state to assure that there's alignment. This first slide describes occupations requiring an associate degree with the largest number of projected annual job openings in New Hampshire between 2022 and 2032. Those that are in red, you'll notice, and that require an associate degree, those that are in red are healthcare related, heavy concentration of the state's need and heavily aligned with the work that we do. But you'll also notice that the second bar in, first bar in blue, the second bar on that table, preschool teachers, early childhood education, an area of investment that the state has made in our work in the last biennium that's allowed us to support that workforce and support the value add of young students having opportunity to learn at that age. We try and make sure that our programs are closely aligned with the needs of the state, but it's not just associate degrees. You've heard from the university system that they are working on programs that require bachelor's and above. Well, in addition to associate degrees, the state has a significant need for workforce in occupations for which the post-secondary training may not be an associate degree. And if you'll turn to slide 6, you'll see another slide from Director Gottlob. And this one is focused on demand for workforce with credentials below an associate degree, but still vital. And again, heavy concentration in red related to healthcare. First one, medical assistants, nursing assistants. Going back to the state's current investment on our work for workforce credentials, this was an area of need that we recognized that the state made an investment, and most of our colleges within the last 2 years have introduced LNA programs and medical assistant programs. But you'll also see CDL and HVAC and automotive technicians. Again, very close alignment with the needs that the state has and our programs by design and driven by the information the state provides to us about what the future holds for New Hampshire. If you'll turn to slide 7, please, you'll see this is just, and it's a partial list of programs in some key areas. It's also an incomplete list because the current year's conferrals are not yet complete. But you'll see about 9,500 credentials awarded in these key areas, about a third of those in healthcare, but also transfer programs that are accessible to 4-year degrees through House Bill 1530, the pathways built between the community college system and the university system. And again, I'll reiterate something I've said in previous sessions, anchoring these in early college, creating opportunities for students while still in high school to navigate to these programs not only addresses affordability, but changes the trajectory for students who would otherwise think that they're going to go out of state for college. The opportunity to help bind them to the opportunities, make visible the opportunities here in New Hampshire, both with the community college system and beyond to the university system, is part of that work. You'll notice at the very bottom of that pie chart, 2 areas, mechanic and repair and precision production, about 1,200 degrees, about 1,200 degrees over this 5-year period in areas of advanced manufacturing, automotive, and so on. Again, an area of critical need for the state in the trades. And as you turn to page 8, although unnumbered. This is the cover page for a publication that Executive Director Reed will share with you. It's our most recent community magazines focused on the trades, an opportunity for us to inform about programs that are available throughout our system, but also for us to recruit students into these programs. Because we can offer the programs, but for us to meet workforce needs, students have to find them and be aware of the opportunities that they reflect. So with that for background on who we are and what we do, I turn to page 9, which is the budget. And this is just a quick summary of the governor's budget and the House's subsequent actions on that. As you'll see, the governor's budget increased funding for dual and concurrent enrollment, maintained our workforce credential program that I've described earlier in the context of the LNA and MA programs and others, and also continued funding for early childhood education, what has become known as the GAP Scholarship. In discussion with Governor Sununu 2 years ago, one of the things we noted is there are a number of programs for early childhood education grants, but they had varied requirements, and students often stumbled when they got to a place where the scholarship or the grant didn't cover that need. This was intended to be a bridge so that students could continue. Increasingly, it's become more important as other programs have disappeared and continues to meet the need, and got wide support in the early childhood community for this program and its impact for the state. Areas where the governor also increased funding, one was for the math learning communities. Those of you familiar with Representative Ladd will be familiar with his advocacy for this effort. Originally funded with an external grant years ago, demonstrated efficacy in helping New Hampshire's high school students improve their math learning outcomes. When that funding disappeared, the program went away. Representative Ladd championed bringing it back. We've been bringing together math teachers from across the state to help strengthen math education. The intent of this increase and the governor's support for it was to take what had been a part-time position, expand it to a full-time position to magnify that impact. The governor also included funding in her budget to freeze tuition for an additional 2 years. You heard from the university system earlier the concerns about increasing tuition. We're not indifferent to that concern. I tell you, we're concerned about affordability for our students, but we also appreciate that there are hard choices that have to be made. We have, over the last several months, been working with our board to inform, provide information, help them to frame the possibility of a tuition increase if that becomes the requirement that they have to consider. So that was the governor's budget. In the House budget, as you can see, the House removed the increases for dual and concurrent enrollment, brought it back down to $2.5 million each year of the biennium. House flattened the math learnings community funding and also reduced the funding for tuition freeze, but we're grateful left intact the early childhood education and workforce funding, 2 areas that we think are critical for the state.
Senator Birdsall has a question.
Please.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. On the Math Learning Communities program, are you finding that the graduates from high schools are coming in and needing additional math work?
I wouldn't say all of them, but if you look at the assessment data across the state, there's a chronic issue with math preparedness. Okay. It varies by program and it varies by school from which the students have come, but as a country, we need to do better with math. I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
Additional questions before he goes on? All right. Continue.
Okay. Slide 10 is a side-by-side comparison of the current biennium, the governor's recommendations, and the House's recommendations. It describes in more spreadsheet form what I just tried to say narratively. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So I think we're still about 13% below the child care capacity we had pre-pandemic. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on how the community college system might play an even more important role in increasing that capacity, which is so critical to our workforce, to women's financial security, to their retirement, to everything.
And to the state's economic well-being. Some of our programs are regional, unique to an area, but other programs like nursing, and in this case, early childhood education, are offered by all of our colleges because it's a statewide need. We have at the NHTI campus, and now more recently, through another partnership with Boys and Girls Club of Central New Hampshire, a child care center on the White Mountains campus in Berlin. We have Head Start programs at Littleton, White Mountains Littleton. We have it in Manchester, and now more recently, we have it in Nashua. So as a resource, a resource that's not only important to the community, but actually is complementary to our mission, because often students who we're serving are our students, are working adults, our parents who need access to that. And then as educators, what we've been able to show in the last 2 years is the ability to make these programs available. Through our apprenticeship program, we've created the first recognized registered apprenticeship for nursing center directors. Again, I think that childcare directors, we have capacity to continue to grow those programs and find different ways. Part of what's going to be a challenge is it's not going to just be more of the same. You heard the university system talk about the changing landscape of post-secondary education. It's not just competition, it's actually changing what it is that students need, who those students are, and how we deliver programs. So I don't want to suggest that right now we know exactly everything that we can be doing, but I think there's still great potential, and the foundation that we've been building, particularly with the support we've had in the last 2 years, I think we are becoming recognized as an increasingly important resource to address the child care workforce needs of the state.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions from the senators? Back to you.
So I'm going to suggest just to go to the last slide, if you will. There are a few other slides that precede this, but in the interest of time, this is one of those testimonials, and I don't know that we solicited it as much as it came to us or organically, but this encapsulates our mission. This is serving students who otherwise couldn't be well served, who are location bound, who need access to opportunity in the regions where they live in a way that's compatible with the lives that they lead, and in doing that creates an example for children and their own families for what the future can be. So I would leave you with that as an illustration of our mission. I would take the opportunity also, and may have done better to just stop a moment ago, to answer 2 additional questions that came up in the previous session. One related to unique. On a practical level, the community college system share of the unique funding is about $3 million a year, a little bit more than $2 million that goes directly to financial aid for our students, about $1 million that goes into the endowment, as Chancellor Provencher described. So that's part of the consequence of those funds being reallocated. The other question about New Hampshire employee retirement system, about 80% of our workforce, even though we are also a unique entity, 80% of our workforce is still participating in that program.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming in today. Your last slide is a perfect lead into my question I was going to ask, which you probably already have an idea what it is. So looking at this is highlighting someone who's been in the workforce for a bit, has a family, and has gone back to school. What percentage of your students do you think would fall into this category?
A significant number, and specific to the nursing program, about 1 in 5 of our nursing students already holds a bachelor's degree in some other field. So they're coming back to do this. The majority of them are not 18, 19-year-old students coming out of high school. They are adults who have found their way to healthcare as a career interest.
Follow?
Follow.
Well, had previous conversations with you about something that I identified that might be a barrier to some of these students coming in and sort of one of your requirements. And I guess if you want to touch a little bit on the steps you're taking, not specifically to the issue I raised, but just to make sure that these classes are available to the students and the steps you take to make it so that they can accommodate their work schedules and their life schedules, you know, with families and jobs and things that they still have to do. If you could talk about that a little bit, I think it would be good for the committee.
We'll be glad to do that, Senator. The issue is that admission to nursing programs, our programs and most programs typically require a test called TEAS, the Test of Essential Academic Skills, and it's deemed to be a good predictor of students' ability to handle particularly the math components of courses, but it's also a course that if you haven't been in high school algebra in 10 or 15 years may be a little bit more daunting. So we are having conversations trying to understand if there's an alternative. Part of the problem is it's such a widely used test. The question becomes, what is the alternative if not that? But we have opened up the discussion to understand, is there a different path that we can use, a different way to evaluate readiness to be successful? Because ultimately, one of the things about our nursing programs, for an open admission, most community college programs, if you're interested, you can be there. Nursing is not one of those programs because the demand is so high, but it's also a very rigorous program. So part of what we want to do is ensure that students can be successful. So what we're looking for is what would be an alternative way of assessing and predicting the likelihood of success, because every one of those nursing seats in a class is critical for the state. Sure. And we want to make sure that students who are in those seats, when that plane takes off, they're ready to fly because the state needs them. This year, and the numbers are not complete, but our RN programs will have prepared 288 nurses as of today and 53 LPNs as of today. A critical part of the state's healthcare workforce, every one of those folks critical, because of the 852 positions that we expect openings each year, 470 of those positions arise from exits, people leaving the workforce, either leaving the state, retiring, or just stepping out of New Hampshire. So we can't afford. So what we're trying to do is figure out, is there a different way for us to assess readiness that a student in that position can be successful and they can be confident.
Well,
Underlying, you had a question.
Mind if I
You have
say more?
another one?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, more of a statement than a question. I think
Okay.
a suggestion that I could offer to you might be more of a consideration for life skills credits, you know, things that they've achieved, you know, length of time that they've stayed with the things they've done. So that might be a good assessment of, you know, how ready is, or how able the student is to take in that information and sort of participate in the field. But thank you. I appreciate your willingness to listen.
And I appreciate that you raised the issue. As I've said, our responsibility is to provide opportunity for every student in New Hampshire who wants that opportunity, and not every student comes through the same channel with the same mold, with the same circumstances. We've got to figure out how we can adapt. So I appreciate you raised it, sir.
Well, thank you.
Underlying.
Thank you. I just want to say, I read mission statements a lot. I think it says a lot about a company or an organization on what it's doing, and I absolutely love the first sentence of your mission statement. It's probably the most clear, concise statement I've heard about a focused role. And I just want to applaud you that reading that gets right to what the heart of what your whole purpose of your organization is. It's the why. Why are you there? And I just want to comment, I just loved it. It was a great message. I read others and sometimes I can't quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. This is absolutely crystal clear on page 3 if you haven't read it. You should read that first sentence. It's a great sentence, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator. In addition to being Executive Director for Government Relations, Executive Director Reed is also our Chief Communications Officer, so the clarity of the language credit applied.
All right, seeing no questions.
Well, a quick one.
All right.
If I could, articulation agreements, I know you have some with the university system. Are those continuing to grow, or are they fairly stagnant? How's that working?
What we've been working on are really the pathways under House Bill 1530 that are more students. This set of courses navigates to this program at the university system, whether at UNH, Keene, or Plymouth. And at this point, I believe we're well over 100 of those pathways that are mapped out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Bertzel.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. So I'm looking at page 1547, and it looks like the difference between the government and,
The big book there is, yeah.
forgive me if you've already covered this, but it looks like the House took a 1.2, just over 1.2 million cut in the first year of your budget.
Is that right?
Yes.
And where would you be taking those cuts from?
At this point, the primary issue is the tuition freeze. I think that's the area. You know, we have a mission that requires us to provide access, but as Senator Lang will confirm, it's also access to high quality. And if we can't invest in the programs to deliver the quality, then we probably shouldn't be doing it at all. If the funds aren't there to freeze tuition, freezing tuition is really having the funds to invest at the level of quality we think is essential. So our first discussion would be with our board to address the funding we need to ensure the quality of programs.
If I might add, we have frozen tuition for the last consecutive 6 years. And in fact, in the last dozen years, our tuition rate has only risen by $5 a credit. So we've been very, very disciplined at holding the line on tuition over a fairly long span of time. Ideally, of course, we would like to be able to continue doing that, but we certainly understand the challenges that you all face with crafting this budget.
Senator, if I may, and I thank you for your question. The other piece that is not in that budget is the reduction of early college from $3 million a year to $2.5 million a year. The return on that investment, last year, I would have told you that about 10,000 students completed about 54,000 credits, value of about $13 million. This year, it's closer to 11,000 students who've completed close to 60,000, the value of about $14 million, virtually all of that underwritten by what has been $2.5 million a year from the state. That return on investment, the ability to avoid debt, the opportunity for those students to get a head start on what they're trying to do for post-secondary education, to even recognize the opportunity that they can do post-secondary work successfully, pathways both to us and to the university system instead of leaving the state for college. There's some immeasurable returns on that investment. So it's not necessarily something that we can solve, but it's one area that if the Senate can find that funding, and I realize you have a lot of other competing priorities, but that's a place where our board wouldn't necessarily address that as a tuition increase. That's something we would hope that the Senate could perhaps consider restoring.
Thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, again, because of my close association with you and the board, where we tried to see what synergies we could get together, I commend you for the dual and concurrent enrollment program, working with the university to transfer credits, and the University of New Hampshire in their 3-year degree program, all trying to make education affordable to our citizens and get our workforce out there for the businesses. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, information technology. And I'm not too awfully late, ain't I? And while they're getting settled, the senators, you have a choice of whether to get out of here early or take a break. So I heard a bunch of early, so we'll probably be back on time by the time we get done. All right.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dennis Goulet. I am the Commissioner for the Department of Information Technology. With me is Deputy Commissioner Ken Dunn, and behind us is our brand new Director of Finance, Loretta Raisin. I'm going to go through this. This is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go through really quickly and hopefully help you on time. But
if there is testimony that she wants to make or you want her to make, the other LBA seat down here can be used if you
okay. I think we'll be all right, but thank you for that. So I'll take you through this quickly, and hopefully not too quickly, and we'll get to the meat of it. Page 1, really, main point here is DOIT in New Hampshire is a very centralized IT organization for state governments. We're probably the top 1 or 2 most centralized in the country, Louisiana being right around the same as us in terms of IT centralization. What that's allowed us to do is, most of the things we buy are bought under a single agreement with, volume pricing, things like that. So we've optimized all of that stuff many years ago, and we continue to seek to optimize it. Moving on to, I know Senator Lang will be reading page 2. Our mission and vision, I'm not going to go over that, but it really, what it says to me, and the reason why I use that terminology is I really wanted to elevate the dialogue between us and the agencies on how we look at information technology and investments, and also provide a leadership role therein. The bottom paragraph, really the key point there, a lot of that hasn't changed over the years, but what has really changed a lot and what continues to evolve is the cybersecurity piece of it, security and privacy, which is we continue to evolve policy and practice on that. But also now, the correct use of AI technology is yet another thing that's part of what we do. Moving on to page 3, the top of the page really is a functional org chart. I want to point out one thing, a key thing there is if you look at CIO office, user services, infrastructure and operations, and the user experience division, that's about half of our organization staff-wise, and then the other half would be the business relationship management division. That's going to be important in later part of my testimony, so I wanted to point that out here, but I won't dwell on that functional org chart. Budget trends that we're seeing. Subscriptions have changed the world of IT. It's really, over time, shifting from what used to be called a CapEx model, where you spend, maybe you'd have a capital appropriation. You would implement a new system using that monies, and then you'd have maintenance on that system for however long you ran the system. It's different now. You still have upfront implementation costs, but you're not really doing a perpetual license anymore. You're paying subscription fees. So technology companies figured that out, and for the most part, there's almost not a single thing we can buy on perpetual license anymore. So what that's done is created has an operating expense pressure on, systems or anything that is in that subscription space. Persistent price increases, and we haven't even seen any tariff impacts yet, but we've seen, very significant increases, hardware, software, and services. And particularly on the services, the types of technology that we're implementing, new technologies, the wage inflation in those spaces in the United States has been significantly higher than what you read in terms of the overall inflation rate of the country. Shorter life cycles, and I think this is a strategy that companies are using. We have to stay compliant. So if a system's being supported by a vendor, then we're good. The federal agencies that audit us, the payment card industry who audits us, we're good because that's one of the big things they look at. If we're not in compliance, if we have systems that are not supported by the vendor, particularly for cybersecurity patches, for patches that would involve data privacy and security, then we're not in compliance, and it threatens the flow of federal funds, or it would threaten our good standing with the payment card industry. And the vendors know that, so they play the life cycle game. If they shorten the life cycle, we have to buy stuff more often, and that costs the state money. We keep spending incrementally more every biennium on cybersecurity and now privacy. So that's just a thing, that's a real thing. And then another thing we've seen, and I think it's a sign that our mission and vision we're accomplishing in some way, agencies are taking monies that they're identifying as IT spends. Not all IT spend is in my budget. A great example is there's a whole bunch of Medicaid system money that isn't flowing through my budget. It's flowing through an accounting unit inside HHS, for example. But But agencies are putting more and more of that into the Class 27 because it then requires that we manage the contracts and all that stuff. So it's, you know, it's a smart move for them. I end up being the one that testifies at Governor Council, things like that, so, for those contracts. So those are the factors, and none of them really are downward trending. Moving on to the meat on page 4. I'll just briefly describe the accounting units here. The top line, agency direct. Those are a bunch of accounting units, one for each agency that has a DOIT budget. And this is really the monies that are specifically for that agency. And so you look at it and you say, oh, that went up quite a bit. And so the way we look at that is, and the way we worked with the governor on this was, the agencies have to hit their overall target. If they choose to invest in IT, then they may have to make up for it somewhere else. So for agency direct, we think it's okay that the agencies have flexibility to go up as long as they're, you know, within the constraints of what either the governor or the House or the Senate feel is okay for their budget. Central IT services, that's all of the stuff that everybody uses. That's the stuff we share. So that we did bring that down. We brought it down by but basically eliminating anything that isn't already running. So when you look at that, there's no fluff there. That's at a point where we keep going what's running, the important stuff that's running today, but really nothing else. Salaries and benefits. We saw the trend coming and implemented quite some time ago, we implemented a hiring freeze, which then created, open positions, which we then unfunded all of at the time of the governor's budget. So all of the open positions we initially submitted in the agency phase were unfunded. So we didn't target that for layoffs per se, but we did unfund all the open positions, and that was 40 of them, which is a significant percentage of our total staff. And one of the interesting things, and I don't find it interesting in a good way, but the structure of how we pay people is such that, I see savings in year one, then with the exact same head count, I'm back almost where I was before in year two, just from, step increases, things like that. And then telecom, we removed some hardware and software, planned hardware and software purchases, and that helped us create savings there. So that really is the net. And then we put the House Bill 2 budget adjustment at the bottom, the $5 million back of the budget cut that the Division I Finance placed, which I'll cover a little bit more later. But what you're seeing in the top line totals there don't include that. The very bottom line totals include that. So since I went over the financial part, I'll stop there for a moment because I think that may be some questions on that particular slide.
Questions from the senators?
Okay.
They're ready to go.
I'll proceed. Going on to page 5, the top of page 5 is really just informational. Division I Finance had asked for that, so we produced it. It's interesting information to see how, the fund, how we get paid essentially. And so I think developing the back of the budget cut, I think they had a general fund target. They were using this to determine how much they were asking for overall. So some of the highlights, we were in the very first tranche of ARPA funds. DOIT received some monies, and we encumbered all of those on time, and we've nearly expended all of it for the projects you see here. So we really did make some really very significant improvements in the state IT infrastructure, leveraging those funds. And there's no new operating expense in this budget driven by that investment. And as I said before, there were no new programs or solutions that were included in the central IT services budget. We took anything new out to accomplish the governor's budget targets. Key adjustments that were made along the way, the biggest being the 40 positions I mentioned before, 39 of which were in the governor's phase. Removal of Class 27 funds related to HB2 in the House phase, which was the elimination of some of these entities, which is, they were pretty small IT budgets, so it's not very material, but it did change things, so we included that as for comment, although we didn't put the specific amounts there because they're not, again, very material. And then, of course, the $5 million cut is, those are the big changes. Moving on to just to take a look at this is really a traditional org chart with counts there, so just for your information. And again, if you do the counts, you see that Business Relationship Management Division, which is the folks who are generally full-time supporting the agencies, is the largest division. So it's a little less than half of all of our organization, and that's really important. And I'll get to that. I'll finally get to that, why that is in a minute. But let's move on to page 7. So the first thing is the amendment to House Bill 1A. On 1A, which was the $5 million cut. We're requesting that be removed. The reason is that, is the reduction of unfunded 40 positions going to be extremely impactful to us already? Yep. But we figured out we'll change how we deliver service, and we can accommodate that. Additional $5 million, because we pulled out all of the stuff that was new out of the shared service budget, and the second part of this, part 2, which specifies that we would use only the shared budget to accomplish that $5 million, the combination of that's kind of bad because it requires then that we cut heads out of that shared group. And so if you figure another 30 or more people, roughly 10% of total staff, that would be more like additional 20% of the shared staff. So then you looking at a total reduction of 30% of the shared staff. What do those people do? They keep all the most important stuff in the state running. So not a good idea in my opinion, but should the Senate feel that we need to accommodate that $5 million cut, then I would request that we change the language to allow us to make the cuts in a way that's best for the state and not in an arbitrary way. We've my deputy and Loretta and I have modeled this out. We know what the impacts are going to be, and they'd be.
You can work with the LBA on what that language would be if we do consider it.
All right, we'll suggest something, and then we'll, as things move along, feel free to talk to us about how we proceed. So basically, we're looking at the impacts really would be mostly in the staff side to accommodate that. Even in the case where we changed the language, because again, we've identified some stuff in the agencies that the agencies could remove. So we could mitigate that somewhat with changed language if it's the will of the Senate to keep the cut in there. So the language would help. It'd still be tough, but it would help. We would also, again, we'd want to try to minimize as much as possible how many people we lay off, because we're talking layoffs here, to be clear with you. This isn't unfunding positions now. We're actually laying people off. We'd reduce overtime and on-call monies, which would change how we deliver service in some ways. In other words, a lot of times what we're doing now is important work on important systems is done on nights, on weekends, things like that. If something breaks anytime, day or night, we have people on call that can fix it. If we pull that back, that slows down our response times. It may have impacts on systems during business hours because we don't have the monies in the budget to do overtime to pay people on weekends. Longer lead times, particularly if there's more impact on the shared service, because these agencies depend on that shared team very much to get their work done in projects or even keeping the trains running every day. So those are really the impacts. A couple other things, and I'll be done. All right, moving on to page 8. This is just a request to accommodate some language that was in House Bill 2 associated with the right to know ombudsman to the PELRB. So the numbers are straightforward, it's not huge, but should that language stay, this is our feeling on what that costs on the IT side. Moving on to page 9. There was something that wasn't included that we asked for, and it was in the governor's budget, but it was taken out. And I think maybe it was because people felt it was costing money, but it isn't. This was, we got a chief privacy officer position authorized a previous biennium, but we didn't have the language in 21R to establish it. So this is just housekeeping. It's not going to cost any more money, and particularly since that position is currently unfunded in the budget. Now, it'd be nice someday when we can afford it. We really should have a chief privacy officer. I think it's an important position. You did, because you in the previous biennium it was authorized in the budget, although it wasn't fully funded, and we haven't filled it. But I think getting the language in there at least gets us in the right place. And the statutory language is already here and suggested and ready to go. And there's a couple other things that were actually included that remained in there that we're happy about. One of them is really important, and I'll explain. It allows us to fund unfunded positions as long as we don't exceed our total appropriation for salaries and benefits. So why is that important? It allows us to strategically fill positions versus just filling positions because somebody used to be there. In other words, if you have, particularly in tight times, you want to fill the most important positions first. And the other thing now, it's even more so, is since I did a very tactical unfunding of positions for the governor's phase, for the agency phase, then the governor's phase, that was whoever was, that wasn't a strategic planned staffing cut. That was whatever would happen to be open at the time. So we would want to right that ship over time by filling once we know what our budget is, filling the correct positions over time. We wouldn't, and again, we've had this language in place. We've never exceeded our appropriation on salaries and benefits, so we've been good stewards of that. And the last thing really is an item that addresses a finding in our recent financial audit, I think. So again, it's important to have. It's not going to cost anything, and so I would ask that it stay. And that concludes my formal testimony, and open for any questions you may have.
Questions from the senators? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Come on down.
He'd have to go to her and council to get approval.
And because of the senator's request to get out as soon as we could, I think we're back on time.
That's great. It's nice to see you again today, Senator.
I think you've been following me, or I've been following you.
I don't know
one of the
who's
two, right?
who. But as I noted this morning, happy Arbor Day to you and yours. My name is Sarah Stewart, and I serve as the Commissioner of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. I'm going to open up with some remarks, and then we'll get right to it. So I'm here on behalf of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, which includes 5 essential divisions: the Division of Parks and Recreation, Division of Forests and Lands, Historical Resources, the State Library, and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. So we've been developing our biennial budget for many months. Under former Governor Sununu, we were first asked to reduce our general fund allocation by 4%. When Governor Ayotte advanced her vision her version of the budget, that reduction deepened to 11%, and I'm proud to say that our team met that goal through tough decisions and collaboration across all divisions. To achieve the 11% cut, we acted creatively and nimbly, and of note, we reduced the arts budget by 50%. Forests and Lands reduced their need for general fund support by shifting generally funded positions to revenue-funded positions, which is not sustainable in the long term, but it's a great example of our attempt to hold the line during a tough budget cycle. State Parks absorbed the Bureau of Historic Sites, even though that entity is by statute supposed to be funded from the general fund. And we left critical positions vacant for months. Our 11% budget plan was initially well received in the House. Representative Ken Weiler gave us, quote, an A+ for our responsible approach. But the budget passed by the House now calls for something much more drastic, a 22% cut of our general funds, which is why we're here today to speak with you to figure out how to help restore some of the House level reductions and return to a more sustainable funding level. Here's what our budget looks like under the 11% reduction Governor Ayotte proposed in her budget presented in February. The total DNCR budget is $65 million. Parks and Recreation self-funds $41 million through a combination of direct agency revenue and interagency transfers. We receive $5.4 million from other revenues like timber harvests and seedling sales, and another $3.2 million from sources like the Conservation License Plate Fund and other dedicated programs. Federal funding totals $6 million, and that leaves $10 million in general fund support. We use every one of those general fund dollars strategically. For example, the New Hampshire State Library must show a state match to unlock federal support for services that benefit local libraries across the state, including interlibrary loan and talking books for the visually impaired. General funds also pay for our forest rangers, law enforcement officers trained in wildlife protection, timber fraud investigation, and emergency response. We currently have 10 forest rangers and 1 forest chief, with 1 position vacant. These are not paper-pushing bureaucrats. They are trained, armed public servants safeguarding our communities and our natural resources. Yet under the House budget, our general fund allocation falls to $9 million, and we're being asked to absorb a back of the budget cut of $300,000 per year. So I'm going to be blunt. Should the House's proposal to eliminate the Arts Council happen, New Hampshire would become the only state in the country to eliminate all public art grants. Some lawmakers in the House have dismissed these grants as, quote, propaganda. But our process is nonpartisan, rigorous, and transparent. Grants are vetted by a governor-appointed Executive Council-confirmed advisory board, reviewed by the Department of Justice, and approved again by the Executive Council. They support music in rural elementary schools, concerts in senior centers, projects that strengthen mental health outcomes, community theater that draws visitors downtown to businesses, and so much more. These programs strengthen our economy and our communities. To help visualize this, we've created a district-by-district map showing where these grants go. I will email that to you directly after today's hearing. You'll be able to see not only the organizations that received direct support, but also make note of the surrounding businesses that benefit as well. So I ask, where should we cut another $300,000 per year? Should we close the state library and end the ability for all 234 of New Hampshire's public libraries to share their books and materials all across the state? Reduce our forest rangers and leave thousands of acres of woodland less protected? Or let local economies lose cultural tourism and quality of life amenities? We're ready to collaborate, and we understand the fiscal constraints and have worked within them. But there's a difference between responsible budgeting and cutting past the bone. New Hampshire is a state that values tradition, preservation, and local pride. The work we do at the DNCR reflects that, and I urge the Senate to help protect this mission. Thank you for your time, and I welcome your questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Rosenwald.
Thanks for taking my question. When, on page 1, you say Forest and Lands reduce their needs for general fund by shifting to revenue-funded sources.
Correct.
Could you explain that?
Yes.
Might have been in the bathroom.
No, that's okay. Do you want to take?
I'm happy to
This
answer
is
that
Chris
question.
Marino. He's my sidekick at all budget conversations.
That's my unofficial title.
Yes, it's a long business card.
So, Senator, to answer your question, what that means is essentially we found other revenue sources, other sources of funding. In this case, for example, the Forest Management and Protection Fund, and we were able to shift that source of funds to be able to sustain the cost of these positions rather than use general funds to do that. But as the Commissioner also pointed out, that is not a long-term sustainable solution to the challenge.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And LBA.
Thank you.
just point out the language to me that might have to be changed if, as they said in their testimony, that it's changing that funding wouldn't be needed. Thank you. Department of Justice.
You're ahead of time.
I know. I can't believe
It's
it.
ahead of time now.
Yeah. It's Friday, it'd be nice. Here.
Hmm?
See, I usually put the time, so I know.
Aren't you smart?
It's fun. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Formella, Attorney General, and with me is Kathy Carr, our Director of Administration. And we're happy to be here today to present to you on our FY 26-27 budget. I know a lot of the members of the committee are familiar with the DOJ, so I always give my little spiel at the beginning about what we do. I'll try to keep that pretty short, but the way to think about the Department of Justice is to think about the roles of the Attorney General, because what you really have is the Attorney General as a constitutional officer and the Department of Justice there to help the Attorney General carry out his or her functions. The AG serves as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, so we provide leadership and supervision to law enforcement across the state. The AG serves as the Chief Prosecutor, so we both prosecute cases in our office, major crimes, so homicides, major drug cases, Medicaid fraud, public integrity cases, other uniquely important or complicated cases, for instance, the YDC criminal cases. And we also work with and supervise the state's county attorneys. So we have a very integrated system here in New Hampshire. We meet with all the county attorneys every other month. So in that sense, the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, serves as the Chief Prosecutor for the state. The AG also serves as the Chief Legal Officer. So I think of that as the state's law firm or the state government's law firm. In that respect, we provide client counseling services to the state and to state agencies. So we work with all of the different agencies on various legal issues that come up. We try to prevent the state from getting sued in the first place. But then if the state is sued, we also are the state's lawyers in court. So we have a civil litigation function, and we defend the state and its agencies when it's sued in state court. I also like to think of the Attorney General as the state's Chief Public Protection Officer, because in addition to criminal enforcement, we also have a major civil enforcement function. For instance, in the Consumer Protection Bureau, we bring civil enforcement actions. In the Environmental Protection Bureau, we bring civil enforcement actions. And even sometimes in the election law realm and civil rights realm, we bring civil enforcement actions. So the AG is the Chief Public Protection Officer for the state. And then, of course, the Attorney General is a department head. It's just the head of the Department of Justice. We have a total of 213 authorized permanent and temporary positions. That's composed of attorneys, paralegals, investigators, victim advocates, grant managers, medical examiners, and support staff. On the next page of the presentation that you have, we just have some stats here. I'm not going to read through each of them, but we've got some stats
kind of a snapshot from fiscal years 23 and 24. Of course, fiscal year 25 isn't over yet. But this just shows some stats of the things the department's been doing. It's not meant to be comprehensive or all-encompassing. It's just meant to give you a picture of what our year looks like in numbers. As you can see, the department is very busy. We handle a lot of different matters, and it's always important to remind anyone who looks at sort of the number of cases that we deal with that not every case is equal. So you might have one case that's more work than 100 other cases, depending on how complicated that one case is. But this just gives you a sense of the general workload and the production at the department. The next page in our PowerPoint is just our most up-to-date organizational chart. I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but it just gives you a sense of what the DOJ looks like. There's a lot of different things that go on at the Department of Justice and a lot of day-to-day activities that don't necessarily make the news. But I think this is just an important thing to refer back to, because I think a lot of times when people think of the Attorney General's office, they think of homicide prosecutions. They think of the big civil cases that they see on TV, and they often don't think of a lot of the other things that the office is doing. Just at a high level, with a couple exceptions, the office is broken up into two divisions. We have the Division of Public Protection, which generally, with a couple exceptions, handles most of our criminal work, and the Division of Legal Counsel, which generally, with maybe a couple of exceptions, handles most of our civil work. And then we have the Office of Solicitor General, which handles all of our appeals, both criminal and civil. We have the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, which, of course, they conduct death investigations and autopsies. And then we have more administrative functions like a grants management unit, victims compensation, IT infrastructure, a business office, things like that. So that makes up the DOJ as an office. I'm always sort of every day fascinated by the number of things that we handle, because the position of Attorney General is just an interesting one historically. You're the lawyer for the whole government. So we don't just represent the executive branch, we represent you too. We represent the legislative branch. We even represent the judicial branch in certain instances. If the judicial branch gets sued, we might be defending the judicial branch, even though we're, of course, in front of the judicial branch all the time. So it's just a very, very interesting office, a lot of interesting functions that go on there day to day. The next slide that we like to include, and I think we would be remiss for not including it in a budget presentation, is just the money we bring in. So we don't just spend money or send money out the door. We also bring money in from various recoveries or lawsuits that we bring against those who may have harmed the public or created harm to the environment, or in other ways cost the state or the people of the state money. We try to recover that as much as we can. We recover money on behalf of consumers. We recover money on behalf of the state, debts owed to the state. So any agency in the state, if they are owed money for some reason and it's gone uncollected, those agencies often have their own ways of collecting money, but when enough time goes by and it seems like there's nothing else that can be done to collect that money, we have a debt recovery function. So that doesn't bring in a ton of money, but we also only have one debt recovery attorney. So I would say that bringing in, a few $100,000s a year with one attorney is worth the investment, because no one attorney at our office, I can assure you, makes a few $100,000s a year. The next slide, just getting right down to the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about, is our budget. And we broke this down for you to see the governor's recommended budget and then the difference between that and the House's recommended budget. And I will explain that difference in a second, but the House left much of our budget intact, at least the details of the budget, but gave us a significant general fund back of the budget cut of roughly $14.7 million total. While that didn't purport to target any specific line in our budget, I can tell you based on the conversations what that back of the budget cut was really aimed at were our grants. So we give out a lot of grants, and there are some specific grants that back of the budget cut will impact. And I will go through those on the next slide. We turn to the next slide. We did take some reductions through the governor's phase that were maintained in the House budget. And those are reductions that we certainly were not asking for these back, but I did want to highlight them just so you understand that we took some reductions. We had 8 positions unfunded. 6 of those were general fund positions for roughly $1.6 million. 2 of those were federally funded positions, but what that will do is free up some federal funds from those positions that we can use to reduce general funds elsewhere. There was also a restructuring, or we're undergoing a restructuring of the Drug Task Force operations, and so there was money taken out of the DOJ's budget and shifted to the Department of Safety. The additions that the governor put in our budget are essentially correspond, for the most part, with the cuts that we received in the House. And I'm going to highlight these because they're very important. This is very important money that we are going to request much of, if not all, back. We'd, of course, love to get it all back. We know, though, that we're in tough budget times, and we can't necessarily expect to get it all back. But I want to just walk through for you what this is, because it's really what we're focused on in this phase of the budget. And then we're happy to have more follow-up conversation with you in the next month or so ahead. But the grants that were cut in the House phase were grants for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the Child Advocacy Centers, and the FOCA grants. On the next slide, we break down, we just give you a short summary of what each of these grants are. There was also $200,000 in a human trafficking grant, but that was by far the smallest piece of the $14.7 million. All of these grants are important, but I have listed them in what I think are the order of priority to get back. And that's not meant to say that any of this stuff is not important, but there is a level of an order of priority here. The first is the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. In the last budget, the ICAC got $1.3 million total over the biennium, so it's $650,000 a year, $1.3 million total over the biennium. This is a really important function for the state. This is a task force made up of members of various departments throughout the state. It's run and coordinated by the Portsmouth Police Department. I think Eric Kinsman, the commander of the ICAC, was gonna be here. Yep, he's right there. So I sat in the front row, so I didn't see him come in, but he's here. But this is incredibly important, and this task force has some impressive stats. The reason I'm pulling up my phone here is not because I'm checking a text or a call. It's because I have the stats on my phone. But just in years 23 and 24, they did almost 1,200 investigations. Went through almost 4,500 tips, 65 child victims that they identified, and almost 100 arrests, hundreds of search warrants, over 2,000 forensic exams completed, a lot of data in investigation, data processed as part of investigations. A lot of offices and prosecutors throughout the state that have gotten training from the ICAC, a lot of presentations to the community. I mean, they really get a lot of production for only $650,000 a year. And in the age that we're living in, with the proliferation of everything going on online and the potential harm to kids online, we need to fund the ICAC. So, again, I'm not, the House gave us a back of the budget cut, so I'm not here to tell you that I think the House was intending to specifically cut the ICAC. I think that would be an unfair statement. But what I think is a fair statement is that the consequence of that back of the budget cut would be that the ICAC, the money for the ICAC would either be mostly gone or potentially all gone, because we only, even in the governor's budget with all of the grants, we get about $27 million in general funds per year. If we have to cut $7 million of that each year, there's no way to do that without taking a significant bite out of these grants. The next grant are the grants to the child advocacy centers. And I think many are familiar with the work the child advocacy centers do, but we have the Granite State Children's Alliance that coordinates the child advocacy centers around the state. This has really been a critical function for the law enforcement community and the criminal justice system. And these organizations, they work with child victims. So victims of crime who are children. Adult victims of crime need a lot of services and a lot of assistance to navigate the criminal justice system. But a victim of crime who is a child needs exponentially more, I would say. And to both help that child recover, but also enable them to obtain justice by navigating the criminal justice system and potentially being a witness in a case, that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of specialized work. That's what the child advocacy centers do. So this is important funding. It's $1.5 million per year. This was new funding that was put in the budget in the last biennium, but it was funding that I would say is overdue, because for a long time, the child advocacy centers were only getting a couple $100,000 from state general funds, and they had a lot of deferred maintenance. And so with this new funding, they were able to hire new mental health staff. They did give their staff some raises, but I wouldn't say it was raises that weren't in line with raises that were happening throughout the rest of the state because of inflation. For instance, state employees got a 12% raise over the last biennium, but it really enabled them to bolster their operations and I think continue to bring their operations in line with modern practice. So this funding is important. And then the VOCA funding, this is very important funding as well. Like I said, all of this funding is important. The reason I put this after ICAC and the general funds for the CACs is because this would be new general funds that we haven't had in the budget before. And the reason these were requested, the reason the governor put these funds in her budget is because of something I've talked about before, but we call it sort of the VOCA gap. It's a reduction in federal funds. VOCA is the Victim of Crime Act, the Federal Victim of Crime Act. That's been grant funds given to the states for many, many years. And for the last few years prior to some of the recent reductions, we've gotten about $10 million a year in VOCA funds. And VOCA supports a lot of functions throughout the state. We've provided you, and we just did it today, but we did bring a list of all of the things that VOCA funds, but essentially it's meant to fund victim services throughout the state, county attorney offices, police departments, sheriff's departments. The child advocacy centers also get some VOCA funds, so they also get federal funding in addition to general funds. The Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence gets these funds, and they grant those funds out to their crisis centers throughout the state. So this is also very important funding. Happy to answer questions on that or to give you more information and follow up, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot what these funds are. The last grant that was included in the back of the budget cut, or I think that would be significantly impacted by the back of the budget cut, was $200,000 to address human trafficking. This is very important, but it's, I put it at the bottom of the priority list, not just because it's the least amount of money, but because it's a function that we can find other ways to cover, I think, if we lost the money. But I list it here just so you know that it's part of that $14.7 million. So that really, that's our budget in a nutshell. The biggest issue we come to you with is that back of the budget cut and the grants that it impacts. Happy to take any questions either about those grants or any other part of the DOJ budget or current DOJ operations. But thank you for your time.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yes, you too.
My understanding is that 14,000 individuals are served through the VOCA grants every year, and maybe you have a better number of that. But I guess my question is, don't we owe some protection and justice to victims of domestic violence and rape and child abuse?
Yes, I would say certainly as the Attorney General, as the state's chief law enforcement officer, I think we have an obligation to serve those victims. It's a really important part of the criminal justice system, and victim services is something that I'm not going to say goes overlooked, but it's not, you don't see that on TV. You see the cops on TV, you see the prosecutors on TV, and we want to lock up the bad guys. But I think we too often forget about how difficult it is for victims to navigate the system. So yes, I would say yes.
If I could follow up.
Oh,
Thank you. So as Attorney General, you get to decide how you would implement that $5 million a year cut.
Yep.
Are you saying that you would cut these 4 grants? That's 4? How you would implement it is just cut these 4 important grants?
We would certainly do our best to not implement that entire cut by cutting the grants, but I feel an obligation to be honest with you in saying that if we have a back of the budget cut of $7 million a year, the only way to achieve it is to have most of that cut come out of these grants. We don't have a big enough budget to cut $7 million off the back of it to, by cutting other things. It would gut the department.
Could I ask questions on a different subject?
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have some questions about the House Bill 2 provisions on the opioid abatement funds. And I do see that Attorney Buffetti is here.
Yep. The Deputy Attorney General is here specifically to help me with these questions because he also has the honor of serving as the chair of the Opioid Abatement Commission.
So, thank you. Thanks for taking my questions. And I was on that commission for 5 years, so I'm very familiar with that. The shift that the House made where they removed the liquor funds from the Governor's Commission, and then backfilled it from opioid abatement funds. I wonder if you agree with me that has 2 problems. One, it basically cuts our funding for substance use treatment services in half. And 2, it wouldn't allow us to fund programs about alcohol or meth or cocaine because those opioid funds can only be used for opioids.
Thank you, Senator. Nice to see you. The answer
We
to
talk every day.
Yes, we do. The answer to your questions are yes. There's a letter from the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Other Drugs, which I'm a member of. There's also a letter from the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission, which was sent to all of you on the Finance Committee and the Senate President, saying that this would create exactly those 2 problems. It cuts in half the state's commitment to substance use disorder treatment, and it creates issues about using restricted opioid abatement funds. There has to be a nexus with these funds under the terms of the settlement and the bankruptcy court orders under which we receive these funds to opioid abatement, a nexus. So my understanding is from serving on the Governor's Commission that about half of what they do in treatment has to do with alcohol and other drugs, not opioids. The settlements require that essentially all of the money, 95.5% of the settlement monies that we get go to opioid abatement projects. The other 4.5% can go to things like outside counsel fees, but it wouldn't cover other types of treatments.
Follow up?
Thank you. Have you seen the language that the Department of Safety brought us about Granite Shield? It's slightly different from what the House put in House Bill 2 about the $3.5 million transfer. of opioid abatement funds to law enforcement efforts up on the Canadian border.
Yes.
Does the department have recommended changes to that language?
Well, so that's different from what was in the governor's budget. This was a change that was made by the House. I can say in my role as the chair of the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission, that the commission expressed its concerns with that provision, again, because of the restricted use of the funds. You know, drug enforcement work is of its nature going and targeting people that are doing drugs, or that are peddling in drugs in the state. They don't necessarily target opioids. They target whatever that person is doing, and they go into a house or they stop a car and they seize whatever drugs, and that could be meth and fentanyl and other kinds of drugs. So it creates concerns about that nexus, and again, that's not what the governor had recommended. So I would just note caution that we do have to establish this nexus.
And one more, if I could.
Okay.
Thank you. There's also a provision about contracts for opioid abatement funds that they are voided after May 1st.
Yes.
Could you speak about
Yes.
that?
So, the House budget had a provision that says that any contracts with an effective date of May 1st or after would be canceled. So I was at the Governor Council meeting this past week. They approved a series of grants for Harbor Homes it's an extension of contracts that we've approved to get direct services to people and fund a number of organizations. That was about $10 million of opioid money with an effective date of May 4th. And then the Governor Council meeting prior, there were a couple of contracts that were voted and approved with the full support of the Executive Council. Because of the way that this contract is set up, they would have effective dates of May 4th. So this would actually cancel, I think, or attempt to cancel, I think there may be some legal issues about that, all of those contracts and all of that good work, which is directly servicing the people for whom these opioid monies were intended, who are getting direct services, who are suffering from substance use disorder, opioid use disorder. Those contracts could potentially be in jeopardy if this provision were to pass.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Lang.
Thank you for taking my question. So I'm going to talk about the CACs for a minute. So this was my one ask from last year, was the increased funding in this. Being a former child sexual assault investigator, I know how important it is that you work on that trauma as soon as possible, not let it fester in a child until adulthood. And it's my understanding that the CACs were having problems with especially mental health services for children.
Yes.
And that they would put out a request, they'd sign this, go have them seen. However, it could take 6 months to a year to get that child in front of an actual counselor because of the problems with our mental health and availability of counselors. And by using these funds, it allowed them to bring that counseling into their organization so the child's seen immediately. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions before I start? Okay. While you were testifying, talking about being the state's legal counsel, it occurred to me that there is an impact that you haven't spoken about on your budget due to the funding cuts in the YDC. With the governor not putting anything in there, I don't think that is correct, because there are ongoing payments that we have committed to over a 10-year period. The House put back in $10 million per year, which would cover that and some administrative costs, which leaves practically nothing for that settlement organization, which will put all the cases into Superior Court. And I have talked to the Chief Justice about how that impacts him. but that would also impact you, and I'd like at least, to get your comments.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. The first comment I would make to that is just a reminder that when we changed the statute in 2024, we did change it so that the administrator could come to fiscal and GNC between budgets to request more funds for the settlement fund. And I think one of the reasons we did that was to give the legislature some flexibility in whether you want to budget all up to the 75 million per year cap in each year, or whether you want to budget something less than that and make the administrator and of course if you wish it so, the Attorney General come with the administrator to request more funds and explain why more funds are needed. So I would throw out that reminder because I think it was set up so that there was not necessarily a magic number that needed to be budgeted in the biennial budget, but there was the option of requesting funds between budgets. But to your question, if the settlement fund were not an option and I think if it weren't, it would result in many more cases going through Superior Court. That would have a budgetary impact on the Department of Justice. We would need more resources in order to litigate those cases. The more cases we have to litigate, the more resources it takes. How many more resources we would need would depend on exactly how many more cases are going through the court system. But I think in answer to your question, I can confirm, yes, if more cases go through Superior Court, or if significantly more cases go through Superior Court and we have to litigate those cases, we would need more litigation resources.
Senator Rosenwald, I guess I've spurred another question from you.
Well, and follow up on your question, we'd need more judges too, but I understand that you have settled a case for $10 million outside of the fund.
Yes.
And I heard that another one was recently settled for $4.5 million.
Yes.
Are there, can you tell us how many other cases we might expect to be settled outside of the fund that we're going to have to come up with general funds for during the next budget cycle?
In general, don't feel that you have to answer
If
that
you
question
can.
if it's.
Yeah, I cannot give you an exact estimate of the number of cases that might be settled outside the fund. I can say this. We always envisioned there would be a certain number of cases where a settlement above $2.5 million might be warranted. And I said this to the House, and I repeat it here. The Michael Gilpatrick case, without getting into too many details, was one of the most serious cases that we were facing. And so we felt that warranted a $10 million settlement. And the Monsell case was another one of the most serious cases we were facing, and we felt it warranted a number above $2.5 million. I can't give you an exact number other than to say, I think compared to the number of cases that would be appropriate for a number under 2.5 million, let me put it this way. When I think of the entire universe of YDC civil cases, it is a fairly small percentage of the over 1,000, I mean very small, that would warrant a number above 2.5 million. So while I can't give you an exact number, you don't need to expect that it's going to be hundreds of cases for that type of number. It's going to be much smaller than that. Well, certainly in my judgment, well under 100, something under 50, and maybe quite a bit lower than that. Well under, probably, and over time, right? So, yeah, but one of the, just something to keep in mind, these cases will often settle as they get closer to trial. We're not going to try, 50 cases a year. Right now we have, something probably between 4 and 6 cases scheduled for trial in a year over the next couple years. And these cases will tend to settle for numbers like what you've seen with some of the more serious cases when you get close to trial. So you're not going to see a bunch of settlements happening outside of the fund all at once or on a really accelerated basis.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want you to know, I keep buying the tickets when the jackpot gets high enough, but I'm still here working.
I'll see what I can do, Senator.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Charlie McIntyre. I have the privilege of being the director of the New Hampshire Lottery. With me is our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Duras. We're handing out a very basic handout, which, other than the cover page describing who we are, is the page related to what our gross revenues, our net revenues and expenses. As you can imagine, any entity like ours, those are related fields. And I would note that from 2015 to 2025, our net revenues have nearly tripled and our expenses have not even doubled. And in the business world, that's considered better than good. And I also want to leave you as a long Friday I'm sure you have had with good news in the sense of, I don't want to, oh, Senator Lang's not here. I don't want to jump the ship in terms of we're in front of Ways and Means next Wednesday, but we'll be revising guidance revenue upwards for this fiscal year as well as the next 2 fiscal years.
That's not only good news for him, it's good news for us.
I expected as much. And so, obviously our budget is rather straightforward. It's our expenses to run the operation. And as you folks know, our expenses come from our revenue stream, so it's not an actual cost to the state. We eat what we catch, and then we send the rest to you folks to spend. So I know you've had a long day. We're going to be brief and answer any questions you folks would have.
Questions from the senators? So nice to end on a good news story.
I thought you'd appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the committee members, is there any other subject that you would like to discuss before we adjourn?
Thanks for ending us on a high
note. See, there was a reason why we saved it to the end.
Save the best for last.
Want to share that?
Last call for questions?
No.
Seeing none, our business today being complete, we are adjourned.
You blew it. Yeah.